I, oh, alrighty. So I have two screens over here also. So if I like drift, this is why. Can you still see me, Arpita, if I do this, by the way? I just changed the setting.
Yep,
yeah,
I can still see you.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty, so you are probably here because you want to learn more about understanding your market, the people that you are serving, how to make sure your product aligns with what people need, which is what market research is all about. So, oh my gosh, this is not aligned properly. It's going to kill me. But first things first, we're gonna get to know each other a little bit. I will introduce myself. I'll answer all the questions as well and give you a little bit more background on what I'm doing and how I can help further after this presentation. And Arpita, I'm sure you've introduced yourself a few times this weekend, but you will also be able to do that. And anybody else participating, very excited to just know what you're working on and why you're here. Then we're going to go into understanding the importance of the market research that you do for your companies or your organizations. And then we'll do a little bit of advice and personal experience and resources from me. I tend to love to use, like, I'm very resourceful in that way that I will outsource things. So HubSpot has been something I've been looking into, the books I've been reading in market research. So I will share all that stuff and my own company, my personal experiences with market research. Then at the end, we will do a Q&A. So you'll have a little bit of a time to ask those burning questions, okay? Okay, so let's start off with introducing ourselves. So I will go ahead and start. My name is Amanda. I am signing in from Montreal, Canada. I used to be a Torontonian, but I have joined the French side, I like to say. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm feeling like a 6.5. Honestly, I was just telling Arpita I have a huge headache today. So I'm feeling a little bit dazed. I think I've spent a lot of time on my screens and just been not spending enough time outside. So I'm going to do that after. And then the project working on today is called the Teacher App. So we're building a platform for educators, specifically for their mental health, because we found that there's a gap between supporting teachers versus supporting youth. We find that teachers are just going underserved. So working on a platform to help them connect with the resources and services they need to make sure that they are thriving in their roles as educators. And then, yeah, we have done a lot of market. Actually, we did, like, the past 2 years have just been market research continuously, which I will get into and why it's important to continuously do so later on. So I'm going to tag Arpita, and then Arpita, if you could just tag the next person on the screen to help them introduce themselves.
Sure. So hi, I'm Arpita. I'm signing in from the Toronto area. I also speak French, but haven't made my way down there yet. Hopefully a little bit in the future. How am I feeling? I'm probably feeling an 8. I really refreshed last weekend. I've met with some of my friends from like high school, so that was nice. Had a little reunion moment. And then the project I'm working on, so apart from YIC, I've been working on my small business, Simply Lotus, and we had to kind of tackle fast fashion and plastic pollution through one simple solution, our rhyme. So that's kind of the thing that we're going for. In terms of market research, like the history of our business is we started as a pilot JA program. So we entered a program and used that as our pilot project. So we did do a bunch of market research while we were in that pilot stage, and then we officially launched and became our own little petite organisation. Donc, so yeah, that's kind of us. I'm gonna tag Artemis. You're next on my screen.
Hello, I'm Artemis. I'm signing on from Florida, and I'm feeling on a scale 1 to 10, 7 probably, because I've been sitting all day and my back is hurting me a little bit. So I'll probably go walk outside at some point. And the project I'm working on is obviously within the challenge, and it's related to hurricanes and flooding. And in Florida and in New York recently, in Texas, there's been a lot of hurricanes in the past couple years, and we're trying to figure out a way on how to prepare people better, so they don't get injuries or potential mortalities, and how to generally prepare with a plan. And we're still doing market research. We've done market research on general apps that do similar things, and also on the specific studies on it and certain needs that specific populations like Puerto Rico need after a hurricane.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a very intense endeavor. I'm rooting for you already.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. And just pass it on to the next person on your screen.
Sorry, I'm passing it to Ayumi.
Hi everyone, my name is Ayumi. I'm signing in from Wisconsin, Midwest in the USA. And it feels like summer today, but like last weekend, we were still wearing winter jackets, then dressed up pretty much like winter, using like pocket warmers, then feel confused, but I'm feeling like 9 out of 10 because my team had a good meeting earlier today, then we are progressing. Then I'm so pumped up for the project.
I'm so happy to hear that. A good meeting with your team is always a good day. That's a good thing. Cool. And then just pass it on to the next person.
I guess it's only Daniel left here.
His response on the chat.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let me read that out loud for everybody. Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm signing on from Vancouver. Oh, I think I met you, Daniel. I feel like a 7 today. I think if I remember correctly, you were sick last time we spoke. I hope you're doing better. And then the project you're working on is something to do with waste management for the local communities. Your team and you have done some market research, but you're looking for ways to improve on market research. Cool. Well, you're in the right place, and I'm glad to hear you're doing better. Awesome. Okay, so I think that's it for today. So it's a pleasure to meet you all. And now that I know a little bit about where you're coming from or how much research you've already done, I feel like I can kind of zoom through a few things and then like spend more time on maybe questions. And mind you, like I am also just as experienced as everybody else in the room. Like we can all learn from each other. And I think that a more collaborative approach would be really cool here. So if ever like you hear something that someone's done and you want to ask more questions about it, feel free to either ask them here or after the workshop. And if you have any suggestions for anyone else's project or anything, any connections, things like that, like this is the space to do it. We're all here to kind of help each other. Okay. Alrighty. Let's move on to, okay, so I always like to start everything off with a why, and I know Arpita, I'm sure, touched on the why this weekend if you attended other workshops or the other organizations that have been helping. Also, sometimes I can't see the chat, so if there's anything that needs my attention, Arpita, just if you could flag me. Thanks for staying for the workshop also. Okay. So I like to ask why, like, why do we do things? And so I wanted to ask everyone, like, to think back to a time where you bought something or you were using something and you thought to yourself, like, if it had X, Y, Z, or if it could do this and that, it'd be a much better product or service, right? So that kind of, for me, is my why when I do my market research with the company I'm building, the businesses I'm building. Like, I always think, okay, what would my customer want? Like at the end of the day, that's the person I'm selling to. That's the person that's going to keep my company alive. So I'm going to prioritize them from day one. So that's kind of our why in general with market research. If anybody else has another why, feel free to drop it in the chat and we can keep the discussion going. But yeah, and the next thing I'd like to ask is, so, oh, hold on, actually, before I go into the what, I want to go a little bit more in depth about market research. So there's different facets to it, right? So I prioritize customers, obviously, but you also need to make sure you're looking at your industry, your competition, like different peers and all that kind of stuff that maybe you wouldn't think of if you're just studying or doing like working for another company. You don't really care so much what's going on in the industry unless you're building something on your own to see how much it fits into that industry. So first, you want to validate your problem, right? Like you want to make sure it's an actual problem before you spend time, energy, money into it. Speaking from experience, like definitely there are things that I wish I had known before starting a certain feature in our app, or like diving into like putting so much money into something when it wasn't needed. So yeah, then you're tweaking your solution accordingly to when you validate your problem, you're essentially trying to come up with the best and most effective solution. And like I said, you're understanding your industry, your competition, the buyers, and you're building trust with your customers. That is like the biggest thing, again, with customers. Like you build trust by hearing them, right? You build trust by validating them, and then by actually responding to their needs. Like it's like in a relationship. You're building trust because somebody brings something up that you don't like, and then you're responding with a change or a suggestion that could improve your relationship. So that's kind of how I see it, and that's our major whys. I like this GIF because it's like, if you're not doing any of that, you're basically going around like Bart from The Simpsons being like, oh, I'm great, like I'm coming up with a solution that literally nobody needs. So you don't want to be like this. You don't want to be in this position. Okay, next up is our what. So market research essentially is a tool that makes you so much more powerful with your decision making. So as entrepreneurs, as innovators, you need to make decisions fast. Like you need to be making them at a level that is probably higher than if you're working for like an employer, right? It's all on you. Like you have to be ahead of the game. And to get ahead of the game, you need data. You need things that you can rely on, that prove or that bring evidence for what you're working on. So a lot of market research is just data that is useful, that you can implement into the features you're building, that, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of you already done market research, so you know it's a lot of data that you're working with. And like I said before, it's relationships with your customers, relationships with your buyers, your suppliers, your the industry experts, just anyone around you that you essentially need to build a proper product. You're just constantly building those. You're going back to them. You're saying, hey, I heard you like 3 months ago when we did this survey. What do you think about this now, right? When you send out a newsletter, when you send out, I don't know, notifications about a new thing that you're working on. So you're constantly, they're your like, biggest cheerleaders. And it's ongoing, so it doesn't end. You don't just kind of do it at one stage and that's it. It comes in different formats. It comes in different seasons for your needs. And I'll go into it later with competitive rivalry and why that's important to keep an ongoing research model. And that's bringing us to this. So how do we do market research? This, bear with me, I will go into it a little bit more in depth. So if there's any questions, like stop me along the way, because I know it can be a little bit like, like when I was reading on this, when I was learning about it, it was like, oh my God, this is too much. Yeah, so please stop me. So this is the 5 forces analysis. Has anybody heard of this already? I just want to like just show of hands if you use the Zoom feature. I just want to know if anyone has. If you haven't, you can say no. I haven't. No. Okay, cool. Okay, this will be news. So yeah, this will be available after as well. Like a lot of these resources are from HubSpot or from just like things that I like to use to make me educated. So definitely you can dive into it deeper later, and I'm always here for questions after. Okay, so the point of this Porter's 5 forces analysis, you got to know your competition, okay? You've got to know how strong they are. I know it sucks like to have competition in the first place, and it's daunting. You feel like, oh my gosh, like what if I'm just like not enough or not cut out to solve this problem because people are already doing it. It's okay. That's the good news. It's okay because you have this to work with, okay? So I'm gonna start first with the threat of new entrants, okay? So at the very top there, you gotta figure out if there's high competition, and if you're, and like, how easy is it for someone new to come and dominate, like, or to come and take a lot of the shares in that industry? Okay, so I'll give you an example. I'm gonna use cars for this entire like analysis or rivalry, like the 5 forces analysis, okay? So cars, you're building a regular car into the market for cars right now, okay? You'd be competing with a lot of folks who are already getting a share of the market, right? So that means that you have a pretty high threat of new entrants. Let's say you go into this market with like a new line of eco-friendly cars that are custom designed for your work lifestyle. You might have less competition then in your niche, okay? So don't worry if there's already high competition in your industry. It doesn't mean that your product won't have a place at the table, okay? It just depends on how you present it. So you got to figure out how easy it is for them to have a head start on you as well. Building a car, for example, very expensive, time consuming, dangerous sometimes. So the threat of a new entrant is also, it's low. You don't have as much kind of going against you, or sorry, you have a lot going against you. So the threat is low for someone who doesn't have money, for example, right? Meanwhile, like making a new chocolate, not as expensive, right? It's fairly easy. So the threat of someone new coming into the field is higher, okay? I'm gonna stop here because I think I said a lot about this one. So are there any questions? Also in the chat, if Arpita, you could flag.
I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. So next up, I'm going to go to the threat of substitution. So the one at the bottom there, okay? The threat of substitution is how much can your product be substituted, okay? So for cars, let's say, there's the substitute of like bikes, buses, the metro, Ubers, but can they do what a car can offer, which means in terms of saving your time, efficiency, autonomy, right? So the potential of this threat being substituted, it's low because everyone needs a car, right? But later we might find that new products come out, like a super high-speed bike or whatever, or maybe Uber has just become so stupid cheap that like that could pose a substitution threat for your car that you're building. Does that make sense? I see Arpita's face. I'm just gonna take her smile as yes. I can't see anyone else's face. Okay, now I'm gonna move on to buyer power. Okay, so are you in this as a seller, you driver's seat because you sell luxury cars and you know that there are fairly alternatives to what you offer? Then buyer power is low. But buyer power might be high if there's a trend on TikTok right now that makes people wanting to buy the newest Tesla, even if there's all, because that's the one that's going to be bought the most. So the buyer power is high because of this trend that's going around. Okay. And then, yeah, if you're mapping this out for your own company, by the way, and you need a second like opinion, you want to kind of bounce ideas, like always reach out. Last but not least, supplier power. Okay, this one over here. A great example of this is when during the pandemic, supplier demand was like wild. Like everyone was, I don't know if y'all noticed this, but I wanted to get like, for example, a kitchen cabinet, and it was like nothing was available because of the supplier demand. So you weren't able to get the material you needed to build your product, okay? Which means that high supply power is there. And that means you're relying on that, which is affecting your end product. But if you're making a cake, for example, maybe you don't need the exact same eggs you use when there's a supply shortage. So you can outsource that. And that means you have low supplier power, okay? So all of this to say, at the end of your research, you want to make sure you have more lows than highs, okay? And even if you have more highs, it's still okay as long as you have an action plan to like tackle these highs, like to get over the obstacles that are threatening your, that are competing against your product, okay? So know that industries change as well, so you always need to be up to date with them. And market research is just essential for your long-term success. So you're always revisiting this, you're always making sure you're ahead of the game. Are there any questions about this model? Because I'm going to move on to SWOT. And I'm pretty sure you've all heard of it more than this one. So it might be easier as well to digest together. Let me give it a second. And Arpita, just let me know about the chat because I can't see. Okay, now.
Questions? Yeah.
Yes, Artemis has heard of SWOT. Yes, awesome. Okay, let's move forward. Oh, there we go. Okay, so SWOT is much easier to do, thankfully. And it requires less of a hit on your self-esteem because when you do the other one and you realize there's so many highs, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is gonna be so hard to overcome. But this one here really gives you tangible things to work through and to ignore, okay? So as like entrepreneurs and innovators, you're choosing every day what to put your energy into and what to focus on. So it's easier to kind of get rid of things by putting them on paper, okay? So strengths, obviously you need to come up with the strengths for your company. What do you do differently? What sets you apart? What's your value proposition? And what are you doing to fix your problem that no one else is doing, essentially, okay? Your weakness is everything opposite to that. Like what is something that's easily replicable? What is something that you're doing that might hurt you in the long run? Like, for example, maybe your team isn't as experienced, okay? Like maybe your product is breaking easily, and like, because you can do this analysis at any point in your building process. You could do it once you have a prototype, you could do it before, you could do it after. So yeah, finding out the weaknesses, doing a lot of research as well on competition, that's key. So figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are too. And then base it off that, okay? Opportunity, what are some opportunities to grow, to change your product, to make sure it's meeting needs? Obviously, throughout this, you're also doing the market research itself, right? Interviewing people, you're going out there, you're asking good questions, you're bringing in data. So not just doing this out of your own, in your own mind, okay? And your threats, obviously, what's threatening your company right now? It could be the economy. It could be like an external factor that you have no control over, but you need to know that it exists because it's going to affect your success. So, yeah, this one's fairly easy to understand. Both of them, we're gonna also, I can send you the templates for them afterwards if you're interested. And if you have any questions again, reach out, okay? Just gonna double check that there's no questions. Okay. Okay, so how do we achieve all of this market research that we need? And I think many of you already said you've done a little bit of talking to people, you dipped your toes. So a lot of it is surveying, interviewing, focus groups, just speaking to the end user, speaking to the people you want to sell to as well. Sometimes, for example, my own company, we want our end user to be an educator, but we're selling to boards or unions, right? So we need to do both. We need to search in both areas and to get that market research done. Because a union's problem, very different than an educator's problem, even if they're in the same field, okay? So having those ready to go, your surveys, your interviews, your focus groups, planned out and ready to execute, and then you do that, Okay, I have a lot of examples as well we can go through for surveys, the types of questions you're asking at which phase, the focus groups and what's important with them, how to conduct them in a way that allows people to feel comfortable to actually share the information you need. So we can go through those for sure. Has anybody done any of these, and which ones have you done? I'm just curious. You could just raise your hand or drop it in the chat. We got a thumbs up. Oh, Francesca, I don't think I've heard from you yet. Let's give you a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I arrived late because I just got out of another hackathon.
It's all good.
Yeah, my name is Francesca, and I'm a university student. And yeah, I've done like the SWOT before, but I've never done the Porter's 5 forces thing. And I actually think it would be more useful, at least to me, because it's more like you can flesh out more with it. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming. Just quickly as well, where are you coming from and what are you working on?
So I'm from Washington, which is the United States. And my teammates and I are working on something related to university campuses. Our university campus is very sustainable and very eco-friendly, so we wanted to use as a model for other universities. But yeah.
Okay, I think I'm in that group. In one of your groups, I think I messaged y'all at one point. But yeah, let me know if you need anything further. It's good to meet you.
Oh yeah.
And you're right. Actually, you said something very valid. It's like you find one of the processes much better for you and your company, and that works best. So like you can do what works best for you at any season, or you can do all of them. We had actually a few marketing students from UBC for my own company do a bunch of types of analyses. Like they did SWOT, and then they did Porter's, they did a bunch of other. There was another, I forgot the name. Oh my goodness, the headache. Right? But it was really helpful just to see different facets, sides to the cube, right? So cool. And then Artemis and Uni have not done surveys and interviews yet. Okay, cool. So it can be daunting. It can be scary to like find people also to interview and to make those connections. But I will say, you gotta do it. You can't get over that part. So learn to get comfortable with the discomfort is my first suggestion. And don't do it alone. You don't have to do it alone. You can have your team on like calls with you. You can, send out surveys, mass survey, emailing. You don't have to feel alone in what you're searching. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go into how we structured ours at my company, just to give you a little bit more context. I wonder if this is going to, did this show up? Yes, okay, it's sharing screen. Okay, this is just something that I learned through my own research and just reading books. Has anybody read The Lean Startup as well? I would highly recommend you read The Lean Startup. It's a really good book. And then The Personal MBA as well, if you're looking to get more kind of business mindset, while also being socially driven. I think the Personal MBA would be helpful. Okay, so let's say you're at phase 1, okay? You haven't even begun, like, you haven't developed your product at all. You're still trying to figure out if it's even worth your time. Certain questions that you want to ask will look different than when you are in the prototype stage or after you've launched and you're iterating, okay? So some of the questions we needed to ask, or actually, let me tell you what we avoided asking. When we first started out, we didn't ask if like they liked a feature or whatever, if they liked this and that about our product. We didn't really touch on that stuff. Even though we had the idea, we had the model, we had everything, we avoided that because it doesn't give you actual information. It just makes you feel good for a second, but it's like you're talking to someone who's probably going to be nice. They're not going to be like, no, I hate this or whatever, like, but you want to get around what's actually going on in your user or your buyer. Okay. So for example, we asked, what's the hardest part about teaching without proper mental health support, right? Like we already kind of named their problem, assuming that they had it. And then we would just listen to them and see like, okay, like, did they even acknowledge that the question like posed the problem? Are they saying, no, actually, I have proper mental support. Oh, okay. Like, what does that look like for you? So really trying to figure out like how they deal with the problem and if there is a problem. That's phase one. Okay. Why was this hard for you dealing with the lack of mental health resources? What have you done to try to solve the problem on your own? What do you not love about the solutions that you've already tried? Okay, so really just problem. This is all like this phase is very problem oriented. Phase two is when you have a prototype, you have your product, an MVP, something that you can actually present. So now we have to switch because we wanted to get the unions paid. These are going to be our people that are paying. So we wanted to ask them the number of questions, like how much does this cost you to solve this problem of the lack of mental health resources for educators? How much are you already paying for psychologists in your schools every quarter, every whatever? Like we try to condense our questions down so specific to kind of have them even admit that there's a problem. So you always want to make them feel like they can admit their own problem when you're doing this market research, because these are the people you're going to sell to anyway. So might as well get them as customers at the end, right? So like when they admit that they have a problem, they're going to come back to you for that solution later, maybe. So you're planting seeds while you're doing this market research. Yeah, so these were really good questions just to ask unions, more so than the teachers we were working with, because we knew teachers aren't going to pay. But also, this is very different in interviews, very different from surveys. Like our surveys, the ones that UBC did with us, they asked a lot of questions. Like I can even share that stuff with you all later. That they asked, how much do you already pay for mental health resources as teachers? Because we were trying to figure out who to even sell to at that point. We were like, are educators going to be able to pay this price point that we think is fair? Or do we need to steer it towards the unions? So we did ask some questions like, what are you already paying to educators, which is why we came to the conclusion that unions are our best bet for now. So we're always going to do that market research though, right? We're continuously doing it. Phase three is after you've launched a product. So after you've launched something, you need to keep making sure your solution is valid. So they say, like in the research I've done, they say that if 40% or more of your user base weekly reports that they would be disappointed if your product doesn't exist, then that's like really good news. Like if you get past 40%, you're just going to be growing at that point. So for example, now the teacher app, we launched, we call it tap out sessions, and they're events for teachers. So after every event, we run a little survey. It's called a Net Promoter Score, NPS, if you've never heard of. It's just a quick little question at the end of something, after they use it or after they attend an event, and it says, how likely are you to recommend this to someone else? And if it's past a certain number, that's good news for us. So we're always trying to get that data and keep it with us, because at the end too, you can use it for investors. It looks good. You can use it for unions. Like, hey, look at all these people that are validating our product. Okay. And then I'm not going to go too much further. But yeah, you just never want to ask them directly, like, what do you like about this? Or what do you not like about this? It doesn't give you as much to work with. So yeah, asking them kind of open-ended questions. And then, yeah, that's kind of, I wanted to maybe give some space to see if there's questions before I do a little activity. And then we'll have like maybe 15 minutes for Q&As, general Q&As. You can ask me about your company, what's the struggle that you're having with the market research. We can kind of work together and collaborate on solutions, okay? Let's go back to the presentation. Okay. Okay, are there any questions, or can we do this fun little activity? I don't see any hands. Okay, I would love it if you could all take like 2 minutes. Some of you told me you've already done some of this, so you're probably phase 2, phase 3, and I'll leave the, actually, yeah, I'll leave the document out for examples of questions. But I would love for you to drop in the chat just a question you would ask your end user or the person that you're interviewing based on the stage you're in, okay? I'm gonna, oh, there it is. Okay, hopefully you all can see that. And I'll just leave you to it. And then I'll share some of your answers in the chat. We can give you feedback as well. Is that a hand up, Francesca?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the activity? I wasn't able to understand.
Yes, of course. Thank you for the
Sorry.
question. You know what I'll do? I am going to copy and paste it into the chat, and I'll keep this on this slide here. 1 second. Chat. Yeah, so what's a question you can ask your users or customers depending on the stage you're at? So if you're pre-product right now, like you're still not developed, what's a question you can ask to validate it, making sure that you're on the right track? If you're phase 2, the prototype stage, what's something that you can ask as well there, like given these examples of how you go about it and what I kind of shared earlier. And then if you're phase 3, what's something you can ask your customers to keep validating your solution, or yeah, to make sure you're addressing other issues that you might want to solve further down the line. Are any of you past stage 2, by the way? Because I can dive a little bit deeper into this. I just don't think anybody is, so I'm not, I didn't go into it too much, but let me know. Okay, Artemis is in phase 1. What kind of difficulties did you encounter during a hurricane? Yeah, how did you attempt to solve the problems you encountered? What would have helped your situation during the hurricane? Yeah, those are great. Definitely giving you a lot more information than if you were like, hey, like, what if we built this? Would you use it, right? This is great. That's really good. Phase 1, do you have an eco anxiety? Yes. If so, are you doing anything to solve it or ease it? I love that. Phase 1, yeah. Good. Even like asking them if they know what eco anxiety is, because I realize like not everybody knows, and I think that's a really valid, and it's valid. Not everybody knows what you're doing, and when sometimes we get into our own heads with like what I'm working on, for example, I just think everyone knows the crisis within mental health and education or what a teacher's life is like, but no. So definitely diving even deeper. Shitangshu. Hi, Shitangshu. I didn't notice you came. Do you want to just take a moment to introduce yourself?
I think everyone knows me. Let me see who was in the call. I feel like you met me through the everyone here these are the Keters in our group. So they're all in the info session yesterday or the intro session last week. So I feel like you all know me. So hello everyone. It's nice to see you all. Yeah, that's your thank you, as Artemis says. So you're tired of my introductions. That's okay. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Okay, good, good. There's already camaraderie here. Okay. YIC is currently exploring the viability of starting a nonprofit accelerator, where our current main stakeholder would be nonprofit founders. So a question you might ask in phase one in an interview setting is, what are the 3 biggest hurdles you experience when starting your nonprofit? Yeah, that's great. Same question, but for the growth stage. Yeah, you can ask the same questions over time as well with your users. You can go back to even like a response they said and say, hey, like, how's this going for you now? You know, like, has anything changed? Francesca, phase 3, cool. For website or app, just an example, what features were not intuitive at first glance or use, and why were they not easy to understand? Yeah, I would even like try to like show them an upgrade maybe of like what you changed. Maybe you went from one intuitive, you thought it was intuitive, but you changed it. So maybe asking them like, if you want more of this, you know, like give us more of your, I don't know, like information. And if they accept, then they're probably liking the new feature or the new change. So try to get them to do something to prove that they like your change that you made. Because sometimes they don't know what intuitive feels like. They don't know, they won't know how to answer that. Or you can even just, like for things like UX design, I would always just consult a lot of UX experts for color things and that. And then when you, with your user, you test them. You just, you watch their screen, watch what they click on, watch what they're spending more time on, and then probe them with questions on that. It's like, does that make sense? I feel like I dived into that a little too deep because I'm in my own head with my own project there. But
Oh, that made sense.
Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Thank you.
If you need help with that, by the way, we're building a web app, so we have a lot of people who can support in terms of like advice. So yeah,
Thank
reach
you.
out. Yeah, anytime. Okay. Also, yeah. So with phase 3, like, yeah, never like start building something that you don't know for sure, like if it works or not. Yeah, definitely keep asking questions. Why is phase 2 related to budget and costs? That just for us made the most sense, because we started to need, like, we needed to know how much people were going to start paying or not paying, because we validated the problem, we came up with a solution, and it seemed like it would be interesting for many people, but we don't know how to keep it running at that point. So now we're like, okay, what do we need in terms of resources, financial resources, to make sure we're going to keep going, right? Because in terms of money, like, if you don't have a problem, you don't need to worry about the money, right? Yeah, I've seen so many people, like, just in the entrepreneurial space that like spend so much on their problem when they didn't even validate it. So it's just like, oh, it's like gut wrenching. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? What are some other challenges? You need to make sure it's a viable solution. Yeah, exactly. Or else, like, money's not even in the picture at that point, right? And so what other challenges are you having when it comes to market research? Like, is there a fear that like maybe you're not gonna get the answers you want? Is that a fear that some of us have? So I'm gonna go back to our presentation as well. Present. I think I saw something in the chat. It's in the rubric to make sure your project is sustainable for a financial business front. Yes. I know money scares people and they're like, oh, like, but like, you need money to make things run. Unfortunately, I don't know how people look at it, but c'est la vie là. Maybe filtering the right data if there are a lot of data, picking and choosing what is the right data to utilize. Ooh, I like that question. Yeah. at the end of the day, like looking at what data to use is it's up to your company. Like what are your goals, right? Like if you want to find out if a specific feature is going to be helpful, focus on the data for that. If you're going to want to focus on if you should even run this kind of event or whatever, focus on the data of what they're doing already. What's competition doing already in that area, and how is it even successful? Because when we did our a lot of research, we found out that a union was partnered with this organization that was running events. No one was going, like no one was showing up, and we were like, okay, why are we going to do that then? So we focused in on that data to see our next step. So focusing on like long-term success and working backwards is like how I would filter. But if anybody else has any other thoughts, for sure. Yeah, Shitanshu, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just on the money question. So the reason I was actually a bit late to the call today was I was just catching up with Lisa there, and we were chatting about our mutual financial struggles when it comes to running our various ventures. So and we like trying to figure out different strategies for that, and hey, you know, how do you figure that out? And so I guess it's something important to keep in mind as you grow. Yeah, and even as you even begin, you know, in the beginning, if you're starting a venture, what is your intent? You know, is this something you want to make a living out of? Is this something you want to make money out of at some point? You know, would you like to quit all your other jobs and do this full time? For some people, the answer is no, right? And so I've seen, for instance, one of our winning ventures last year at the Youth Impact Challenge competition, not the Climate Change Makers one, but our general summer competition. It's an incredible venture, which was a completely volunteer-run enterprise. And a core part of the model was to keep it volunteer run. But for them, what sustainability meant was creating a sustainable volunteer recruitment model. And so, which is to say, they didn't need to make money in their kind of concept. What they did need to do is, especially as different, you know, they had a group that was like basically high school seniors who are now graduating. They had to present and share that, hey, this is how we're going to keep our venture sustainable from a volunteer recruitment side and keep, you know, the HR going to kind of run the enterprise. So money and or just figuring out how you're going to keep the work going is always going to be an important part of any operation. So just think about those questions, I guess. And yeah, and literally that's why I was late, was because we had the conversation about how you're going to get money to keep our various enterprises sustainable. So it is an important question, as difficult as it is. And just a heads up, I'm also like a big critic of just monetary systems, and there's also one of the things we talked about today is just I think yeah, just the way economic systems are structured have a lot of issues with them. And so it's also important perhaps to be critical of the systems we are operating in, realizing we're operating in systems. And so just like, yeah, having the mindset of both. Yeah, so
Yeah, totally.
money is important. That sustainability piece, maybe not money itself, but the sustainability piece in general, right? Keeping your venture sustainable.
Totally. And even if, you know, for example, with us, like maybe they're, you know, our unions aren't going to pay into a model that we have, but they might pay in a different way. Like you just have to explore that. Like it doesn't mean just, you know, if your client's not going to pay for a service, doesn't mean they're not going to pay in a different offering. Like instead of subscription, maybe it's a sponsorship deal, or like, you know what I mean? Like there's different ways that you just got to know what they're doing already, or what they like, or what's going to actually make them feel good as well. Sometimes, you know, subscriptions right now, y'all, I just heard about this. People are starting to cut away from that because it's so annoying to customers right now to constantly, I know if you have Netflix and stuff, to constantly be reminded that you have a monthly subscription, and if you don't cancel, it's going to renew. Like people just don't want that headache anymore. They just want like a yearly subscription, and that's where we're at. That's what I read the other day. So it's important to know like what's happening in those in the industries as well of like financial, like what's going on that might impact your own idea and company. Yeah. Are there any questions? Oops. Sometimes the chat pops up for me and sometimes it does not. Okay. I'm going to move on to our last little moment here. I just loved coming across this. It was this person who was like, you're stuck in a scroll doing market research, aka comparing yourself with people who have been doing this 10 times longer than you. It will happen. You will feel very discouraged a lot as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, but that doesn't mean that you're not coming up with a solution that has space at the table, okay? Surround yourself also with people that like are doing the same thing. Connect with a lot of people, a lot of industry experts. Put yourself out there, like know that you have space at the table, as long as you're doing the work and iterating and pivoting. Okay, it doesn't mean just because one thing doesn't work, another thing won't. You have the drive, you have like everything that you need in your support network and everything. Like, I just don't think it's impossible. Okay. Well, that's it. That's all. 5 minutes to spare. If there are any questions, you can ask now or in the Slack. You can tag me at Amanda, and I would be happy to help you. Okay. You're not alone, y'all.